Hello, in the next few chapters, we're going to really talk about how to fix up the buckets. Because now we know what all the buckets are, or most of the buckets, now you need to fix them up. The first thing you have to find out is what your priority is and what their priority is. That's really, really important because you'll find you actually have different priorities. So when you go to work for your partner, to do the work with your partner, you're going to have a look at a certain amount of buckets with that person. And then they'll be looking at your buckets and they'll probably be different or quite different. When I first started doing this practice, I tried to do it on a piece of paper, like write all the things and put them in order like 1 to 20. And it was just shocking. I just couldn't work it out. So I suggest you don't do that. What I did in the end is I wrote each bucket on a little piece of paper, like a square piece of paper, the 20 of them. And I put them all in front of me. And then I try to put them in order. Now, you're going to find this really difficult to do, to put them in order. Some of the buckets very, very easy, and others will be very close to each other. So what you do is you make now a line going down, pick them up one by one, and sort of put them in order. So when you start at the beginning, you choose what is your highest priority bucket, whether it's love, children, family, whatever the thing is that the priority bucket is, you need to put that in order. The easiest way to do it is put your highest priorities first, and then I put things that were low priorities that didn't really affect me so much, or buckets that I didn't think were too problematic for me, and I put them lower. Once you've sorted out the order of your buckets, then you ask, if you've got a cooperative partner, to put the order of their buckets. And then you just look at the two side by side. It's really, really interesting when you do that, because you can't just assume because you've got the first 10 a certain priority that the other person has that priority. Then when you've done that, you can talk about it because, for example, you're going to find that if you've got a certain bucket high priority and they don't have it prioritised hardly at all, then to fix it up, they've got to put more input in, invest in that bucket. That's what's really interesting. For example, if you're with someone where the love bucket is very high and the physical bucket is quite low, and then your partner's got the physical bucket quite high and the love bucket kind of comes down the line, then you need to understand that that's an area that you might need to shore up, that you might need to fix. You need to really have quite a lot of open discussion with each other about this. You won't have the same order of buckets. Rarely that will happen. Therefore, you have to really have a good look at them. And your first 10 are your most important, I feel. Some of them can crisscross. Some of them aren't as important for some people as other people, and some of them won't be problematic. For example, if you're both atheists, the faith bucket won't be problematic. Whereas if one's a Catholic and one's an atheist, that could be a problematic bucket. The next thing to look at as a partnership is to then take your buckets that you think are working in the relationship for you, and then the ones that aren't working. And then there'll be another group that they're just like, they're okay. So you'll have 3 sections. We have one that's really working well. I feel like, love bucket's great between us, and the fun bucket. But that money bucket, we're having problems with that. Finding about the money, we're finding about the children, we're finding about the family stuff. That goes over there in the problem bucket. And that helps you to work out where to put your energy, because if the love bucket's really strong for both of you, you don't need to really be fixing that as much because it's not really as broken. But if one of you, for example, is having a lot of trouble with the money bucket and the other person isn't, then you might have to work at the money bucket for one person. Or if the physical bucket's not being filled enough for one person, then you have to work at that. Looking at the problem buckets is really, really good, and not assuming. That's why I wrote this book, because we assume things with people. We assume things with ourselves. And I'll tell you that once you start to put these buckets in order, you get a really challenging look at yourself as well. Like, what really is important for me in my relationship? What are the things that make it glue together and work? And what are the things that aren't that important to me, and it's okay? The whole idea is getting your bucket filled and then getting your partner's bucket filled. That's the whole idea of it. Because where the problem buckets are is where the break is going to be in your relationship. So the sooner you can figure out which buckets aren't working and then start working on those buckets, the sooner your relationship can heal. You will sometimes have the same bucket. Perhaps you're both fighting about the children a lot. So that's a bucket you both need to work on and find out better ways and strategize how to deal with that. Maybe you're both fighting about the money. Maybe you both having trouble with some other part like the work bucket. Or perhaps you're having trouble with the friends bucket, the mutual friends. Whatever the buckets are that are problematic for you will be one. They can probably be for both of you or not both of you. You really need to really be talking to each other. I found this a really interesting experience to do it with my partner, and it was so enlightening to see what really was important for them and wasn't important for them. The whole reason the relationship doesn't work is because some of these buckets are not working. We're not investing in them, we're not filling them, we're not making them good buckets. And because we're not doing that, it's actually impacting on our relationship. Having said that, if you've got 3 problem buckets, your relationship's going to be much stronger and healthier than if you've got 12. And some people can have 12. They can probably even have more. And then there's quite a lot of work to do. Now, if you land up with a lot of buckets that aren't working for one or both of you, you need to prioritise which one is the most difficult or the one that you're both struggling with and start working there. Don't just give up, just start working there and then work down through the buckets. In a relationship, I always believe that we are in that relationship to meet the needs of the other person. In the relationship with ourselves, and to a degree in the relationship, we meet our own needs. But mostly we are supposed to be meeting the needs of the other person as well. And that's why a lot of relationships fail, because you might have one person meeting the needs of their partner, but the partner is not meeting the needs of the other person. Now, this can happen because people are selfish, but it can also happen because people don't know what your needs are. And if you're not a person who's very verbal and can explain to the person, or you're a bit too shy, or you don't really have a voice, maybe you're an introvert, maybe you don't talk much, or you're shy, then the person doesn't know what your needs are. But once they do, then you can start working with that. Our needs are important because we need certain things in relationship for relationships to actually work. And if you don't have those things, they can break down. For example, the trust bucket, very important. I've actually written a whole book on surviving betrayal because that's how important the trust bucket is. Because if you don't have the trust bucket, then the whole thing can fall over. Of course, you can fix the trust bucket by the one who's betrayed or lied to promise never to do it again and to make the huge change they'll need to do to make the bucket work. However, that bucket can completely destroy your relationship. The children bucket can destroy it because you're fighting about the kids all the time. The money bucket definitely is a big bucket that if it doesn't work, you can get into heaps of trouble with that one. That one needs to work or not. The work bucket, if one of you is a workaholic and the other one is lonely and doesn't have any time with you, there's so many buckets that do or don't work. When the buckets start to fall away in other areas, they can actually be manifest and be seen in the physical bucket and the space bucket. I noticed that people who now aren't having much physical contact or intimacy and also aren't being in the same space with each other, it's almost like that's the before sign that something's going wrong. That bucket is really huge to show you that there's problems in the relationship and you really need to work on them. It's different if it's both consensual, you both decided you want to have less physical relationship, or you both don't want to be close with each other and you both love each other and it's fine. That's different. I'm talking about when you started off with a very close and engaging physical relationship and wanted to be close to each other, like not have a lot of distance. And now you don't even sit in the same room and you barely actually hold hands or touch each other. that bucket will be an indicator bucket. I call that the indicator bucket. And you can see that things are going wrong in that bucket. Your homework this week is to write out all your buckets, put them in your order, and then talk to your partner if your partner's aware of doing this. And if they don't want to do this, you can just do this on your own. You pretty much get a lot of clarity around it for yourself, and you'll definitely know where it's not working, and then be able to talk to your partner about maybe working on these things that you need, the problem buckets, and then you find ways to fix them and the ways to fill them up. And you can fix these things up. I really believe if you want to stay in that relationship, if you really want to be with that person, you can fix it, because we can change all the time. People are always changing if they want to, and always fixing things up. So all it means is making some effort. For example, if the romance bucket's pretty empty these days, and one of the partners finds that it's very high on the list and they need it, the other partner just needs to get off their butt and start doing something here. It's not about, oh, I'm not like that, that's not who I was, because at the beginning you were like that and that's who you were. You just got really, really lazy. And that's the other thing. People get complacent. They take one another for granted. And while the whole thing's falling apart, they're watching television. It's really important to do this work. If your relationship fails, you want to come out of that knowing you did everything possible to try and make it work. Because the devastation of a failed marriage and or relationship is worse than trying to fix up the bits that work. You met each other, you fell in love with each other, you wanted to be with each other, and many of you want to be with each other for the rest of your life. But it's like a garden. You can't just water it for 3 weeks and never water it again and expect it to grow. It'll just die. But if you keep watering it and come back and water it again, it can come back to life. And this is why I'm doing this, to help you save your relationship. There's usually one person who's a little bit more invested than the other to save it, and that person will be a little bit more proactive, perhaps. But having said that, if you both really want to be together and you want your relationship to survive, and there's many other reasons to have your relationship survive, not just with the two of you, but if you have children, the unit stays together, and financially it can be a good thing for you that you don't end up having to split everything and both start again. There are other reasons too. If you breaks down, you don't have love in your life anymore. You sometimes don't have that same kind of physical relationship in your life anymore. And you don't have a friend. You're actually going to lose your friend, because the person you're living with is probably your best friend. You're going to lose that. So all these things are really worth trying to do. And I really encourage you to do the bucket on the pieces of paper, get to know yourself. Then when you are ready, talk to your partner about it, and bring your little list down and say, well, which are the most important ones for you? And I go, oh, I don't like all this stuff or whatever. You go, like, just bear with me. Which ones are the important ones to you? Make it simple for them. Which ones are the important ones for you? And which ones do you think aren't working? That's pretty simple. Besides going into every single one of them, the ones that are important and the ones that aren't working, then you know where the area is for you to start working at least. And then you can bring your part in and say, then you can say, these are the ones that aren't working for me. And then that partner can help you fix them. I wrote this book, and when I started writing it, I was pretty excited because I could see how it would help you mend your relationship and how you could stay together. And I could see how it would give me and also my partner clarity. And we sat down and we looked at all the buckets, and it was really interesting when we did it. It's very important because we're individuals in a relationship, and so we have individual needs. Have fun with this one. See if you can find out more about yourself and your partner, and which buckets need filling because they're problematic, and which buckets are really high priority for your partner, because that's the other thing. If certain buckets, for say, example, the first 5 are really high priority for your partner, invest in them more. That's where you want to put the investment. And then they invest in your 5 buckets more. We're all different, but we can always stay together as long as we keep meeting each other's need. and keep loving each other and keep coming from love, because doing this is a love experiment, isn't it? It's all coming from love. So I wish you well. I'd love to hear from you. I've got a YouTube channel called Real Relationships, Wendy Edwards. So you can always write to me there, and I'm on Facebook too, under Spiritual and Energy Work with Wendy. I think this will work for you. I think it's got great possibility, and I hope that you can make your relationship even better and better.